Alright guys, Phil here, back more. Persona, continuing on. I don't know what I want to do today. No messages or anything?
I feel like this is the conversation that we'll probably be having for the next couple of weeks.
What's this sister? Just us. Okay.
Is this locked in at this point?
Time for Yuji, time for Takemi.
I have issue with today's game. I don't think this is going to affect injuries, though. Everything you say rings true. My issue with today's game, I very much feel he's played this game on the easy side compared to the level of difficulty that other players have specifically had to deal with, especially marginalized players, especially players of color. And Cody was very much set up with relationships that, when I say this, I don't mean the conspiracy theory of Tara setting up alliances. Tara's about to light himself on fire.
That's not what I'm talking about. I don't think anybody with any credibility believes that.
But what I will say is that Cody, being an attractive, cishet, white man, really did help him out. And then it's a conversation people don't want to hear, but here's the truth of it. He was surrounded majoritively by other white men. He naturally worked with other white men. It gave him a step above a lot of the other players. So everything that you say is true, and I truly do believe that Cody is most deserving of the players that are sitting with us. My issue with crediting his game outside of this specific season is that I do feel that it was such an easy ride for him, and that all of his privilege really contributed to the fact that he was able to be so successful. Even just having the ability to be selfish. That is something that comes with privilege. My little trans Muslim ass coming into the house, I don't get to be selfish, I have to be smart. And I think with Cody, I applaud him for what he's been able to do with the resources that he's had, and I think that he absolutely is the most deserving person in the house. We can go through, and there's some really brilliant stuff he did. I think the war between him and Tyler, that was the only time he really had adversity, and he was able to sort of topple Tyler over, but even in that regard, Tyler sort of went through with the flag. So, I don't know. I think the jury is absolutely going to see the game up front. The game up front for them is going to be these competition wins and the players that he was able to get out and how he was able to set himself up. And
maybe we'll go
if he
spend time
loses,
with
I would be
Takemi.
shocked, but I will also hold my tongue before I say that he played a great game outside.
Is her name Takemi?
And I feel like it's like we said about the competition. It's like the structure of the game benefited certain people, like Cody already, right? These people who had this privilege, and then the competition just never went the way they needed to go to upset the balance and to try to break this sort of rigid structure that favors certain types of players and certain types of privileges. So that was really what I thought was really tough, is that not only is all that.
Well then, I think we'll go the Shibuya, and then I guess we'll eat a burger?
Yeah.
That increases your guts. Do the challenge.
Oh, I just want to say, going off of that, what I don't want to do is discredit how brilliantly he played the game.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Because it was masterful how he was able to network that into massage it, but I also do want to acknowledge that the easy setting went on.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it's worth acknowledging, because I think that perhaps if you're listening to this podcast, you've probably already seen some of the discussion that's probably already happening. And I imagine how most of the discussion will go is, one extreme is going to say,
was there no challenge
he's an
yet?
all-time great, he's amazing, how dare you discredit anything he's done. The other side will say, oh, but he has it on easy mode, and so his game is worth nothing. And that, those are going to be the two loudest arguments, but there's value to both. I think that you can look at what he's done, which was amazing, and see, at the end of the day, you can only see what you saw, right? So anything else is just kind of trying to extrapolate, and that's going to be a little bit less reliable than what you can actually physically see. But on the other hand, just because you can only see some things doesn't mean you can't extrapolate, doesn't mean you can't try to dig a little deeper and try to, look at other factors. And we talk about this a lot, especially toward the end of seasons, that luck is just such a huge part of the game, and one of the biggest piece of luck, and maybe the biggest piece of luck that anybody experiences in the game is you walk through the door, and who are you looking at? Who are you playing with? is like
I'll
that's
buy all
the
these, yeah.
biggest factor that you will encounter in the game, and you know, having a bunch of people that look like you, that are around the same age, that from the same areas, that have similar interests, like that's just such a massive advantage to start with. Having a couple friends, super great. You know, stuff like that. Like, and those are things to consider. You know, unfortunately, we can't see Cody's game without some of those things. So, you know, I would personally say I'm not discrediting his game in any, you know, really valid way that is saying like because of these things his game is not worth anything, or I'm going to completely take away from it. But there are things to consider, especially when comparing his game to other games. When I look at somebody like Dan Giesling, who has, you know, similar advantages in terms of his background and stuff like that, but who has experienced a lot more adversity in the game in terms of like competition outcomes and situations that he's been in. I still see Dan as a more well-rounded, sort of like capable player to get out of certain situations. And then when you look at somebody like, say, Daniel Reyes, who goes in as a woman of color, and on a season where there were, I believe, cast. What would Cody do if Kaser had won that?
Oh, this is McCuz
for
first appearance.
HOH.
Okay.
Like those are things to think about.
Well, I think it's adversity for me. Like, I need to see Cody go through some sort of adversity. And yes, you can say that, like, well, he hasn't because he's played this particular game. But I do think that luck played a lot of the part of why he's received so little friction going against, like, his best path forward. And for me, the only time I saw a little glimmer of adversity was way back pre-jury when there was sort of that war brewing between him and Tyler, and it was circulating on Danny's position in the game, and Cody was trying to protect Danny, and Tyler was trying to get rid of Danny, and Tyler pretty much set up the cards to go in his favor. That was the one time we saw a bit of adversity, and if things had gone differently, Cody would have lost that round. But it didn't. So I think what I wanted to see Cody go through, and it's why I'm so critical of Boston Rob's game as well, is that how can this player handle themselves when they are facing adversity? What I do want to acknowledge is that Cody was not the only person who came into this game with this level of privilege, and he was able to dominate all of them. So I will never say that he is not a good player. You have to be able to say Cody's a good player. I just want to see how Cody plays when he has a little bit of adversity he has to overcome.
Yeah. How much do you guys think that one of his best breaks was the whole Josh and Casey not being in the game? I mean, I feel like it's out. I guess it's outside of the game, but it was a great break for him right there at the beginning, right?
Oh, the committee entirely would have shaped out so differently.
The whole butterfly.
Memphis and Christmas were the driving forces of the committee, and they, if I'm correct, and I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, they were the two spots that came in when Josh and Casey, if they were going to be in.
I think Keisha was I think Christmas was a lock. Christmas was in. I think, yeah.
They already written all the Christmas jokes. All the Christmas puns were already written. They had
One person in casting was like, y'all, listen, you know who would be gold on this season? Right for the holiday, like, who got paid to make that decision? Yeah, I'm sorry, Taryn, I interrupted you. Please continue.
I believe Keisha was the other alternate that got the spot when Casey dropped. But yeah, I think if Casey and Josh are in, that means that Memphis and Keisha are out. And let's just say that Cody still wins the first HOH. That means that Cody is probably in with Tyler, Casey, although maybe he goes after Casey or Josh right away, because he has to know that that's a big crew. But he wants to work with Tyler, so maybe I don't know what he does. We have to ask.
This doesn't do anything.
Let's say he still goes after Casey or whatever. But then we've already gotten too far. Right? So Casey was the thing, and then there's no Keisha to go after. So who does he go after? It's I don't know. Maybe it is Josh. I don't even know.
Well, his goal that first week was to make the least amount of squads.
Exactly.
And just to set up relationships, which was smart. He played his first HOH pretty much perfectly how you should play a first HOH. He set up relationships, he didn't make too much of a splash, he put himself in a good position to make a lot of alliances later down the road. So I don't see him going after Josh if he sees that being a path of more resistance in terms of other players that he is trying to work with.
Yeah, I think the group is probably Tyler, Cody, Casey, Josh, Christmas, because that foursome, Tyler, Josh, Casey, Christmas, is so, like, you can't beat them all at once. They exist, so Cody's obviously going to want to be in with them. They're going to want to be in with him because they don't want to be targeted for week 1. So that forms. Nicole's in there. Danny's probably still in there. Day and Bay are probably attached to Cody's side of things, not Casey's side of things, considering the relationship between Bailey and Casey. And then we probably see something somewhat similar, but with people like Tyler having more power. People like Tyler, Casey, even Christmas, just having more backup, more weight in the game to swing around. And then we probably see maybe a similar boot order in the sense that, like, maybe I don't know, because maybe if Tyler has more sway, more pull, and he's more attached to people that aren't Cody, maybe he is able to pull Kaser like he wanted to, and maybe Kaser and Janelle come in on the Tyler end of the power structure, and who knows where things go. Really, again, just these small changes could really have a massive impact on how things play out. And Cody definitely has a much harder hill to climb in that spot. Is he still capable of climbing that hill? Yeah, I think so. But it wouldn't have been as hard, and it would have been more fun to watch.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we could talk for days about how the season would be different, even just with one costume change. But I think when I look at Cody's game, I see the moments where he got a little bit of a pushback. His reaction is to sort of like dominate the moment and to get things back on him. And I'm not saying that if he did face that adversity, say Josh's side is coming after him, that he wouldn't be able to survive it. Because if he's able to be as successful as he is with these resources, clearly he is a capable player. I just want to see him go through the levels that other players who are labeled the greats have been tested. And I just,
Yeah, I think the closest we saw was that Tyler week, Enzo's HOH, and I do like how Cody handled it. That he saw what was happening, and what he did was he didn't freak out. You saw him. You saw he wanted to, but even without Derek there to calm him down, he kept his cool, and he just kept trying with Enzo. Hey, but Tyler's kind of screwing us up, isn't he? Enzo was like, I don't really care. Like, okay, yeah. And then he goes, okay, new tactic. I'm gonna tell him about the committee. That really pays off down the line. But he just keeps his head down. He keeps working on it. And eventually he gets back. And part of that is Tyler screwing himself up, but he could have freaked out. A lot of players would in his spot. He could have freaked out. He could have gone anti-Tyler. He could have blown up his own spot. He got caught from Danny. He managed to flip that back around. And he managed to keep steady and let the other person screw up. And then he was like, okay, solid. I don't think it was like, I'm not saying this was like masterful play, but he didn't screw up in a spot of adversity, which I think is a decent sign. It reminds me a lot of Derek, honestly, where I have a similar criticism of Derek's game, where he had a couple moments of like, ooh, this is his thing where he has to figure something out, and he did, but I was like, but what if it had gone just a little bit worse? Like, what would have happened then? Something that I've been thinking about lately is, if Cody wins, dominates the season, let's say never gets put on the block, he wins the final 3 HOH, let's say he even wins unanimously.
which is possible.
Definitely possible. Cody versus Derek. I mean, is that a conversation to be had now?
Here's what I will say in regards to that, is that I felt this way back in Big Brother 16, I felt like Derek was given a lot of credit for what Derek and Cody did. I do think that Derek was a strategic force behind a lot of those decisions, but I don't think Derek would have been able to make a lot of the moves that he did without Cody's social competence. Cody was really great at building relationships, especially with the women. But he was really great at building relationships that that alliance was then able to utilize in their game.
What do you want to do?
I do feel that Cody didn't get the credit he deserved from that final two. I don't think I don't know, Brandon, what do you think? Are you able to say one of them is better than the other?
Well, I think it's interesting. I mean, I think the point you make is really good, and it's interesting because following down all of what you did say is,
How do we
you know,
pull up the phone again? Oh, it's assist. That's all.
If you want to say he's following the same blueprint as Garrett, I think the podcast said all the time, you're part of the game, or, you know, you have social and you have physical, you can learn the strategic part of the game, and yeah, it's interesting. And it's tough, right, because Derek will play again in the stigma of the leaders, so we may never know how he's going to play. But yeah, I mean, now we've seen Cody.
Yeah, we can buy like a DD player.
We would have to see if Derek plays again. Would he need someone again to have that sort of capital to be able to do it? So yeah, I mean, this is certainly a way of looking at it where Cody has a bit of an advantage, honestly, now that Cody has more game to take.
It really tests the way that I look at things, because I weigh, your first season's going to weigh a lot heavier to me, just flat out. I don't care if it's an all-star season, I don't care if it's a new player season, just your first season is the most telling for me, because most people only play once. That's your only shot. You come back around a second time, you're playing a different game. Honestly, it's not the same thing anymore. And so, you know, you can be great at all-star seasons, but you'll still lose every time as a first-time player. And most people only play once. So I really heavily weight the first game. And in the first game, Derek straight up beats Cody. Head-to-head beats him. He's obviously the better player in that spot. But second time around, Cody is playing against some tough competition. He has some advantages, sure, but he's playing against people who've played before. It's not like he's playing against new players. It's not like he's small,
why not?
right? And he really just like straight up dominates this season. And it's like, well, Cody was obviously the lesser player in season 16. But what about Cody now? Like, what if I'm comparing Cody now? But then it's like, okay, but I have to wait the first season. It's a little hard.
Well, then also, like, would Cody even work with Derek if this was a modern day? I mean, like, would he be as loyal to Derek? And I'm sure Derek would pick up if that he wasn't as loyal. So it's like, I think that was loud.
Derek was to come back and play a second season and not do as well. He's coming back with that integrity. He's coming back with, or was it you, Brendan? He's coming back with something of being a winner. And he is considered by a lot of people in the community as one of the best ever playing. Cody didn't come in with him. Cody came in as the guy who was so loyal that he went to the end with the person who was going to demolish him in the final two. So Cody didn't have, I think, the same pushback that Derek would have if Derek came back to play again. So that's another thing. But I also feel like it's unfair to be like, he's never going to be a better player when he has played really good games.
Wow.
It's you know, again, maybe jumping the gun, but like, what else are we going to talk about at this point? But I honestly, I think this might be a conversation we're having for a while. I feel like this might be, you know, the new sort of like which one of them is better, and it's a weird situation, especially because they have played together and they played so closely together.
I feel like people are always gonna lean towards Derek just because I think people respect Derek.
It's true.
The truth of the matter is, and I will also say, like Blake, y'all can come for me if you want when it comes to considering Derek on like the lexicon of best players. He's not on my list. But we love, the game is subjective, everyone's allowed to their viewpoint. when it comes to the two of them, I do think that people respect Derek's game. They respect what he did. I think he really ran the season sort of with an iron fist. Whereas Cody, if we're talking about BB22, we also have to have the conversations of like his privilege coming into the game. Whereas Derek like came to the game with a bunch of people that he didn't know and like lived out something pretty broken.
Yeah. Good points. Good points. All right.
He was a little bit older as well, you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know, he wasn't as old as he wasn't a 19.
Yeah, actually, I just realized, yeah, Cody is like only like a year younger than what Derek was when Derek played.
Yeah. Well, one thing that might help us figure out these sorts of questions is a legacy watch. So let's get into. Unless you guys had anything else that you wanted to bring up before we move on.
How much is left of this
Legacy
podcast?
Watch. We can get into that.
How is there still an hour and a half to this
When I
podcast?
actually included Derek in the layup.
Really, yeah, Derek
What do we want? Kindness?
We didn't talk about Christmas at all. Poor girl. Actually, no, poor girl. She deserves this.
We'll talk about Christmas in the Legacy Watches. This is her likely her last week here. Man, I can't remember which week it was that I did that. But let me bring up the Legacy Watch here. If you're watching the video, you can see. Here we go. I have it up. Okay. All right. So let's get into the Legacy Watch. So last week on the Legacy Watch, previously on the Legacy Watch.
What is going on? This is nonsense. Oh my god.
Somebody rigged it. Were we degraded? This is a bunch of clips that are happening right now.
I thought you were gonna do the voice.
Oh.
Or do the British version of the announcer. Being Rolla! My favorite thing.
All right, so last week it was Tyler's eviction week, and there was some theorizing, maybe by me or maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. That perhaps we had a little bit of an anomalous results because there were a lot of big changes, a lot of big shifts that happened in the Legacy Watch, and so this week I think we're gonna find out. We're gonna see. Has it stuck, or are things gonna go back to the way they were? Let's see. Let's find out. Any predictions, Sharifa?
I don't know. I already see this, and like my soul is set on fire. I disagree with so many of these voices. Like, what? No.
Yes. To be clear, for those that maybe this is your first time listening, what I do is I poll the audience every Saturday morning. I tweet out a link to the survey. It's at Armstrong Terran on Twitter, and you guys fill out the Legacy Watch.
Looks like me and the audience need to have a little conversation. I think what we could potentially see coming up is Cody creeping up to that top spot. I think the more dominating the game he plays, I think the more credit that he's going to get. So I can see Cody potentially shifting upwards.
I don't fucking know what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
What? How was I right?
So wind up above Tyler, no doubt.
I can also see Nicole shifting a bit upwards too from Honey's point of view, just because of the fact that she is a winner. Well, at this point, guaranteed Final 3, potentially Final 2. So I can see her.
Yeah, I mean, now Nicole's the only person to play after she had won to get to the Final 3 outside of Dan. Mind you, there aren't that many winners I've played after they won. I mean, it's only Will, Jordan, Dick, Ian, Nicole,
Cody with Cody right there.
and Dan. Oh, and Boogie.
Cody on Cody.
Cody. Yeah, I kind of want that to happen. That would be kind of like the end of Cody's Big Brother story, and he's full circle.
It really is a thing too where let's assume they go to the final three, Cody wins, he takes whoever, he wins the game. Like, Nicole and Enzo are seen a certain way through that, but then after the season, they genuinely, and they mean it, they say, if I
don't know what to
was gonna
do.
say Cody.
There's not much to do right now. I forgot how pretty slow this section of the game
Yeah.
is. Like how there isn't that much to really do here. I think we'll probably just go to the library.
Alright, let's talk about David. Because, I mean, sorry, but just, again, Nicole planned on doing that with Corey, and Corey, at the very least, had a very good chance of beating Nicole. Like, if Corey wins at the final four veto, like, if things go the way Nicole wanted to and Big Brother 18 a little bit more, then she could already be one of these people.
Yeah.
It's weird the way that we end up seeing things up, but anyway, I feel like people are more accurately judging Nicole as much as I felt like before they were not giving her enough credit, and I feel like people are coming around to her at Big Brother 18 game, especially considering how well she's doing. Yeah, we're not talking about Nicole yet. We're talking about David, who is still in the bottom tier.
Ooh,
Just
leveled up in
Just
guts.
by a hair. He
Okay.
cannot rise.
So we can do
This makes me sad. I liked his appearance in the jury segment, and
so we can go and do the clinical trials now.
best player, no. But was he? He was like a beacon of light on this season. I felt like he had the most positive attitude. He was the happiest to be there, and he was just like so excited to play. And like none of that showed in any of his game talk.
There were some good moves on
I didn't
his
know that
part.
was a
His
thing.
execution was poor, and his ability to read the game was not always fantastic. But he did gauge that he was at the bottom. He did
Why not?
align with Day in kind of knowing that they were all at the bottom despite his history with Day. He did make the move to vote out Tyler. You know, there are some like kernels of like good game there with him. You gotta dig through a lot.
And I think we had a lot of fun legacy moments. I mean, winning the competition in the dark was really fun. And
Morning.
story.
Crowded as ever today, huh? Feel like being packed in like sardines, city style.
Insane! Insane!
I don't need to joke around. I just don't know what to do. I get anxious unless I'm doing something. Yet here I am, suddenly with
blowing up
nothing
Tyler and
to do.
Cody
It's
early
so
on this season.
awful
Like,
just
he had a
waiting for the
lot
results,
of
isn't
like
it?
big memorable moments this
So
season.
worrying.
And like, I really feel like he's gonna be one of the people we remember from the season. They're like, oh, David, the rookie. He was on the guy that hadn't even played before was on an All-Star
All I can
season.
do is believe and wait.
Well, I mean, if we're talking about
I feel
like
better after
legacy
talking.
in terms of
It's not good to be a killer in the morning.
just specifically your ability
Let's
to
have a
win,
great day today.
am I going to think of David? No. But if we're talking about legacy just in terms of like the whole package, the player, the personality, like who's memorable, who am I going to think about? I'm not going to think about half these people who made it to the final six. I'll probably think of David. Like whether you liked him or you like to hate him, you like to hate him. He was polarizing. People were upset. They were like, how they let this man? Oh, what is he doing?
Why not?
He was polarizing.
I was gonna do it anyway,
That
so.
means a lot as a Big Brother player. I'd rather watch that than the smart game player.
I think he was polarizing in a fun way. He wasn't polarizing in a some people thought he was not a good person or not acting well. Like, that's what we've seen so many times with some BB personalities where like they're polarizing for these reasons. Whereas, you know, David was a great guy. He was always likable. He was always fun to watch.
Leave it to the examiner.
Things that made him, you know, polarizing.
All right, above David, we still have Nicole Anthony here, just clinging to the bottom of the low tier. What a way she has fallen since the start of the season here for Nicole Anthony. But it seems that here she will stay.
She kind of tanked her reputation in this All-Star season. You know, I think she's a sweet girl. I think part of what made her so popular last season was that she was so able to be known because there were so many unlikely people that we wanted to see fail. And she was somehow like making her way against the odds to the end game, and that was so brutal. She was such an underdog. She came back this time and she kind of took all the good favors she had built and she like poured gasoline and she lit it on fire. And I think that's sort of what she's remembered for. I think at this point, she's sort of known for like being really popular for a season and then coming back and being, oh, can I only connect with her because of the specific circumstance she was in, and not necessarily because of the player.
Yeah, I really feel like, honestly, Nicole's biggest mistake this season was agreeing to be on the season. She didn't have enough time to recover from the first time, and she also, like, this is, you know, I don't know, maybe, I just feel like if you're not willing to pregame, you shouldn't play an All-Star season. You know, unless, you know, like, Sequester has dealt with this, but, like, if you, unless there's, like, very enforceable ways to prevent pre-gaming, you should probably just, nah, I'm good, because, like,
By the way,
and, like, she needed somebody to tell her,
I do think this will be the last episode, by the way.
this happens.
Not really
If you
feeling
don't
too
pregame,
great.
people are gonna think that you're pregame with people that are
I'm getting
not
tired
you.
too, so it's like, fuck
And
it,
that's
we'll
bad.
send.
And so, like, look, I think Nicole, she could have said no here. She could have said, I'm sorry, it's too soon. But all right, give me a call the next time. And they would have given her a call in a nice, cushy spot against new players.
Yeah.
She didn't have to do any pre-gaming.
Tentative protection or whatever.
Which would have been great for her.
Yep.
They would have loved her. They would have been like, I want to work with Nicole. Like a bunch of fans coming in who were rooting for her.
take care.
You know.
100%.
Yeah. So there we go. There's Nicole. Above Nicole, we have Kevin Campbell still. Yes. He actually moved up a little bit. Nicole did well as well, just a tiny little bit. Moved a little bit up this week from last week, where they moved down a little bit. But here's Kevin. I think I would imagine actually Nicole. Nicole moved up like a small amount. Kevin moved up by like a full point, and which is still kind of a small amount. But I have to imagine you saw him in the jury, maybe like this time.
Past 30, right?
I don't know.
Okay, I think we'll end here.
The Steve's position lights me on fire. I think Kevin
One's here.
is an extraordinary
Next episode,
player.
continue on. For now, thank you for watching.